I'm over here at the IBM Cloud website. What I'd like to do is walk through a demo of some of the functions and capabilities of the IBM Blockchain as a Service. So let's go over here to Blockchain, and you can see it pops up Blockchain there. And it's going to bring up a service name and location as well. But before we get into the capabilities and spin up some peers, for example, and install chain code, let's go over here for those folks that do not have an account yet. Now, there is a starter membership plan. You get a credit of $500 to use towards your network. And what you want to do is sign up for this if you do want to play around with the blockchain as a service. I will say that there's two subscription models and there is a cost to maintain a membership from a month-to-month perspective. So you need to pay attention for this. I would recommend if your company doesn't pay this, then what you want to do, that is pay for the subscription, is essentially use a free trial for 30 days and then cancel the account so you're not charged the $200 a month for the starter membership. So let's go back to this page here, the main page. If we scroll down, you'll see that it has the pricing plans. This is where you get your $500 credit. This is good for you to develop on, to test, to create your peers, your nodes, to get a real feature capability of the service. The cost is $250 per month, and then every peer that you have spun up is that. So this is still going to cost some money. So pay attention to what you're using if you don't want to have the subscription. The enterprise plan is $1,000 per month. Again, if you're not going to deploy an enterprise application that's using blockchain with Hyperledger, then you probably don't want to use this. It's going to be pretty expensive. Now, the main difference between the starter plan and the enterprise plan is the fact that there's fault tolerance put in there. And then you also have a HSM manual that you could, HSM module, I should say, that you have the ability to utilize. So you want to select the starter membership. After you get your account, it'll go ahead and allow you to create a blockchain instance. Now, I want to point out too that the region and location to deploy in, Dallas is usually the default location for the starter plan. And then the other locations like Sydney, Frankfurt, and London, you could see that it's regulated to typically, if you're using the starter plan, you're going to be regulated to Dallas. Just be aware of that. Now, if I choose the enterprise plan, for example, I will then have some more choices if I so choose as well. But anyways, I'm going to just go ahead and get started here. I'm going to go select create. This will take about a minute. A lot of it just depends on the latency and the amount of activity on the service. Could be your network latency, whatever that is. Now, this came up pretty quick. It is loading. And what has just occurred is that it just created a blockchain network for me to start loading my chain code, and it deploys two organizations. And actually, this picture here is actually pretty valid. What it's doing is it's created two organizations, Organization 1 and Organization 2, with the peer and a CA as well as a MSP as well. With that said, let's go and get started. We'll go ahead and select launch. When we first log in and start the service, it's going to give us the opportunity To learn more about the platform, there's a video, sample apps are here, and instructions on how to proceed is there. I'm going to go ahead and get out of that. Now you could see that it deployed. One thing to point out here is to pay attention to the organization that you're in. Now the organization I have is org1, but if I go here, I could select org2 as well. And you can see that it pops up. You can see that it says org2 here. I'm going to go back to org1. And you could see that the orderer and the org1 peer is there. What I want to do now is I'd like to add another peer. And it allows me to add up to an additional 15 peers is what the limit is for the development environment. So I'm going to go select one. Now the reason I'm adding another peer is I want to have multiple peers, and when I create a policy, I want the policy to enforce 2 peers to essentially approve the transaction, which is actually endorsing the transaction. Okay, so I have 2 peers here. You can see this is starting. That's going to go through its little effort. What I want to do here now is just walk you through a few things. You can see that it shows my membership, org1 and org2. I could add another member, I could invite them, or create them as well. Now a channel, remember a channel is going to be essentially how the peers are going to communicate to each other. This is going to allow you to submit transactions. Now, what I want to do is I could join peers to that channel. Let's go to join peers and just see what is there. So it looks like the other peer hasn't actually started up yet. So that'll take another minute or two. That could take a few minutes for everything to sync up. Now let's go to notifications. This is where I could create what is a notification, essentially an alert when there's a request to the channel. Certificate authority. I have the ability to be able to specify my certificate authority if I so choose, generate certificates, as well add users. API is here. The API list is here. What I want to point out is for developers that want to develop locally and then push out to the blockchain service, you want to go over here to the network credentials. These are the credentials you need to copy basically into your APIs for your client app, for example. Then I go to develop code. This is where I could deploy code or go and follow the install guide or whatever I feel like doing. But here is where I want to actually install code. Now what I want to do is choose a peer. And you could see that there's no chain code that's been installed. Now what I did is I downloaded the Marble app already. I'm going to go install it. The chain code, I'm going to call this, is test code 1, let's say. Version is number 1, and it is Golang. But it could also be a node as well. Go here to choose files. Go to where the code is downloaded. I just have it on my desktop. Probably not a best practice, but for a demo, it's quick and easy. I'm going to go submit. Okay, the chain code has been installed. However, let's go see if it's available to initialize, and it is. So I'm going to go to make it initialize here. And I could call specific arguments to get it initialized, or I could just leave it as the default. And it looks like everything looks okay. I could put in arguments too, like for example, if the peer doesn't have enough storage, don't install the chain code, whatever I feel like, adding to that I could. I'm just going to go next. Now, this is where I want to pay attention to my policy. Remember, the policy is going to be the endorsement policy. So down here, you can see that I have two policies, actually two members to this policy. That is member A and member B. So I want to make sure that two peers endorse transactions in this case. So I have to select the endorsement policy to reflect two peers. And a peer is a member, basically. Now, a member is going to be part of the network, the channel as well. So I'm going to go submit. Now, it may take a few minutes for that to initialize, to basically come up and running. You want to check here to validate when it's done. It'll error out if there's any issues. Now, a couple other things too, when it comes to channels, you want to, of course, generally create a channel. If you're going to deploy the Marble app, for example, you want to, of course, create a channel and make sure that you have the correct peers that are part of that. In this case here, both peers have been added to the channel, for example. And then the members are listed here as well. But with that said, if you want to go and try samples, I would recommend the Marbles application. There's also the vehicle and the perishable goods examples that you could go view as well. With that said, let's just go back to the overview before we close out here. And let's just see what we have running. We have several peers. What we could do is we could stop the peers if we don't need to have them running anymore. That'll take a few minutes. But one of the first things we want to do is, if we're done, is we want to go reset the network. We want to clean up and go back to the default config. And this will clean up our network. And that way, when we log back in, we practice again, everything's good to go. Or what we could do, if we're not going to log back in a reasonable amount of time, like a couple hours or a day, we need to basically terminate these instances, because you're going to run up some costs for this if you don't pay attention. So you want to go over here to, let's go to network preferences first. I forgot to show you one thing. So you can see here, this shows us we're using the CouchDB. Location is Dallas as well. But let's go back to the network here. And what we want to do is let's close this out and go back to the service details, which is this page here. Let's go here and select delete service. And this will delete the service that we just spun up so that we don't incur additional charges. Okay. Now, what should happen is that we should get the dashboard with nothing listed here. So there's no services listed. So that's what we want to see, because again, if we deploy a blockchain network, then we're going to get charged for that on an hourly basis. So we don't want that to occur. We want to use our free credits as long as possible. Now, go ahead and log out, and that's going to wrap up the demo. Let's proceed on.